Thank you. I'm lucky to be here for other reasons too. No, this is okay. I'm Christopher Turner from the V&A in London, now a rather mediocre cafe with an ace museum attached, I'm pleased to report. It's an institution that's been a leader in the reproduction of monuments and the salvage of architectural fragments since its inception in 1852. And as Helen noted, the origins of the museum were in the 1851 Great Exhibition, which sought to literally bring the world to London. The museum's very much a product of empire and also the inferiority complex of the British. Prince Albert thought that Prussian design was so much better than British design, so the museum was founded to address that problem. In 1873, the V&A's cast courts opened, a sublime spectacle which similarly sought to bring the world to London and place it under glass. There were casts of Trajan's Column in two halves. The 25-meter height of the gallery was specially designed for this purpose. Also, the huge door of Bologna Cathedral in Italy and Santiago de Compostela in Spain, Michelangelo's David, and other plaster replicas of notable monuments and sculptures. It was a sort of surreal mashup of Western culture, a grand tour before the age of bucket tourism. And the casts were copies, not fakes. They were intended as educational tools to be sketched by students and artisans so as to educate them in the best of design. And the originals were sometimes seriously damaged in the casting process. But now these replicas are often more faithful than the originals, which have been subject to the damage of weather, pollution, and even destruction through war. And the cast course reopened last week after a lengthy restoration process. And there is a new interpretation gallery between them, which tries to update the cast courts and give them new purpose. In 1867, the V&A's founding director, Henry Cole, published this convention for promoting universally reproductions of works of art. And he called for the mutual exchange of copies between European countries. And 150 years later, the museum established the REACH project, which was initiated by Adam Lowe, who you'll hear later, and sponsored by the Perry Foundation. And it was a project that sought to update the convention to a new era of 3D printing, photogrammetry, and drone technology. And Abu Dhabi was one of the signatories of this new international alliance, which sought to share digital records of heritage under threat. In the period following the iconoclastic destruction of monuments perpetrated by ISIS, archaeologists were looking to digital technology to help reconstruct lost artifacts. And the updated convention sought to really plug into that mood. A scaled-down version of the Arch of Palmyra, destroyed by ISIS in 2015, is on display in the new gallery, alongside a CNC milled limestone reproduction of a grave slab from Kala Koresh in remote Dagestan, which you'll hear about later. When the museum, as part of the REACH project, the museum collected this piece by Forensic Architecture, which sought to model and 3D print 4 plume clouds from various attacks in the Middle East, thereby freeze-framing the terror of war. Forensic Architecture have described these bomb clouds as architecture in gaseous form, short-lived monuments made of everything a building once was: concrete, plaster, soil, glass, even bodies. And when the museum was asked to curate the UK entry to the London Design Biennale earlier this year, for which the theme was emotional states, we chose to work with Forensic Architecture in collaboration with Art Jamil and supported by the British Council on a new research project in the Middle East, which sought to update and extend the REACH project. Forensic Architecture, who were recently nominated for the Turner Prize, unfortunately they lost, it was announced on Tuesday, are a research agency founded by A.L. Weissman and based at Goldsmiths at the University of London. And they're a collective of about 15 members, a team of architects, filmmakers, lawyers, archaeologists, and scientists. And they create navigable 3D models, detailed timelines, and interactive maps of environments undergoing violence or conflict. Sorry, I was worried this would happen. They use this as evidence for international prosecution teams, NGOs, human rights organizations, and political bodies such as the United Nations. For example, the bomb clouds, which you saw earlier, were the result of a study that Forensic Architecture did with Amnesty International to build up a detailed picture of events in Rafah, Gaza, over 3 days of bombing in August 2014, known as Black Friday. Because their investigation team were denied access to Gaza, Forensic Architecture had to reconstruct the events from hundreds of images collected from social media, from ambulance cameras and citizen journalists. And they stitched together these images using digital tools such as shadow clocks, telemetry, and video syncing to create a 3D model of Rafah, a temporal map of the conflict. Another study for the UN was a very detailed architectural examination of a US drone strike in Pakistan, using digital methods to analyze where the shadows of bodies were inscribed into the architecture of a room, indicating the number of people who were killed there. And 61% of such drone attacks were against domestic buildings, with civilian casualties that now exceed 4,000 people. Oh, this isn't working for me. Help. Sorry. Okay, it's working. All right. I'm going to miss a couple of slides to keep us on track. For the Biennale, we commissioned, and Natalie Kane and Brendan Cormier for the V&A curated Maps of Defiance, a new research project. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Everyone else seemed much more skillful in addressing these problems. Maybe you should stay with me up here. Okay, we commissioned a new research project that used similar techniques to collect and document evidence of genocide and enslavement perpetrated by ISIS against the Yazidi people in northern Iraq in 2014. The Yazidi, whose religion derives from Zoroastrianism, are monotheistic and pray towards the sun, but they were mistakenly thought of as devil worshippers because of their reverence for the peacock or fallen angel, which they think mediates between them and God. And as a result, the Yazidi count 72 genocides in their history. Their villages were also razed by Saddam Hussein. ISIS destroyed over a dozen Yazidi shrine and mausolea, sanctuaries where at New Year pilgrims gather at the setting sun, the moment where the peacock angel was thought to sit on his celestial throne to bestow his blessings. About 500,000 Yazidis fled the area from ISIS, fleeing up the slopes of Mount Sinjar, which you see here. And according to a UN report, 5,000 were killed as they did so and dumped in mass graves, and about 10,000 were kidnapped, many sold, and the women taken into sexual slavery. We work with Yazda, the global Yazidi organization, an NGO formed to campaign for social justice for the Yazidi, who initiated in 2014 the genocide documentary project, of which this study is a part. And Forensic Architecture were first approached and asked to become involved in the case by Nadia Murad, one of thousands of the Yazidi women to be kidnapped, who was the recent recipient of the Nobel Prize for her activism against human trafficking. Though Forensic Architecture analyzed the fate of Yazidi religious sites, they also treated mass graves and houses where atrocities took place as heritage, places of collective memory. We wanted to highlight the fact that the destruction of cultural heritage is an important aspect of the UN's definition of genocide, which is defined as violence committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. So attacks on cultural property are an important and specified aspect of genocide. In workshops in Turkey, forensic architecture and their teams trained Yazda members in evidence collection and the legal rules around it, as well as in digital processing techniques. It was a sort of training program that has many similarities to the capacity building projects which lots of you have spoken about. We heard on Tuesday about the expense of long-range drones and detailed surveys. Our ground team learned how to hack cheap, readily available technology. You know, this adapted water bottle contains a very cheap digital camera which can be attached to a kite or a helium balloon and then sent up to record the area to be surveyed. You know, of course, you can use drones, but this technology is much more easily available and cheap. And forensic architecture talk about these kites as civic satellites. And this data was combined with terrestrial mapping, you know, in places that were safe enough to do so. And the photogrammetry was worked up to create a really detailed portrait of the religious sites and mass graves and other places desecrated by ISIS. And it's evidence that had to be done very quickly because there was a risk that it might be lost or otherwise tampered with. So it's very important work. And at the Biennale, the V&A and Art Jamil showed films of the training process, which we hope can be put on Google and used by other people. They're going to be readily available. And the cutting-edge digital analysis of the collected data. And we showed the simple DIY toolkit that had been put together, methods which we hope can be easily replicated in other conflict zones. And we also showed 2 3D printed models of a shrine reconstructed from photographs and then shown behind in its current desecrated state. And munitions experts analyzed the force of the blast to show the size and location of the bomb that ISIS put there. And by plotting the assault on a timeline, the exhibition showed the systematic nature of the destruction leveled by ISIS on the Yazidi, clearly showing it as a genocide. And next year, we'll show an iteration of this project at the Milan Triennale, where it'll be on for 6 months. And we hope to also bring it to Dubai, to the Jamil Art Center, which we all were lucky enough to visit last night. And the exhibition there would be timed to coincide with the Sharjah Architecture Triennale, which takes place next fall. And the theme is the rights of future generations, which is a perfect fit for this project. And we hope that this research will eventually help bring the perpetrators of these war crimes to account. Now that the Yazidi heartland is being repopulated, it's already being used to help in the reconstruction. There was a very nice picture of the reconstruction under process here, you know, of these sites of symbolic importance. Many of the temples and mausolea have already been restored. Thank you. And, you know, we hope that this DIY toolkit can be applied in other sites and conflict zones. So it's very exciting to talk to you all today because obviously lots of people here are doing similar work and it would be really helpful to coordinate all these efforts, I think. Thank you so much for listening.